All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third session of ID Pro Track. I would like to remind you again that if you're in this place, you're either already a member or hopefully on a track to be a member. So for you, we're introducing our best speakers right now. Let me introduce you Anthony, who's gonna talk about very important things which you've probably done in your life many times, called moving. Anthony, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Wow, I didn't expect much of that enthusiasm this morning. I figured everybody. I figured by.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Here we go.
I figured by Friday everybody would be like, "Woo! It's the weekend." So, welcome. Today we're going to talk about Moving Day, planning and executing your migration to a new identity and access management platform. My name's Anthony Hammonds. I work for CoreBlocks, a systems integrator company based out of New York City. This is one of the things I've done so many times that I would not even care to recount half the instances that I've done. But basically, to introduce myself, like I said, I'm a principal architect at CoreBlocks. I've been there for about 7 years. I've been in the IT industry for over 24 years. I've been specializing in identity and access management platforms for the last 20. I have done systems in size. The small end, I've done smaller than 500, but it averages out on the 500 for the low end, and I've done as much as 155 million people into user directories for identity access management. That was for a government entity who, you don't like April the 15th far. So, and in my free time, I am a player of Xbox One for first-person shooter games, and also a noob master. So I do like to do that as my relaxation. So that's basically me in a nutshell. So basically I want to start. Decision was made, you've heard, we're moving. Now, that incites a lot of emotion. And as the slide presentation goes forward, this is kind of based around the pretense of just like moving day. You come home and you've decided that you're going to move out of your house. It's kind of the same, elicits the same kind of emotions, fear, doubt, what's happening. And one of the big questions that everybody starts with is, why? Why are we moving? And there's a lot of reasons why people decide to move their identity management platforms. One of the ones I've come across more frequently is I go into a lot of shops where they've coded their own solution. They started with it, grew with it from the ground up because that was what they thought was best at the time. They tried to open source it, but the problem with it is they've grown, the system's grown, and it's gotten to a level of complexity that managing it or doing anything it's just gotten out of hand. And it is a nightmare to get anything done. And management, of course, they drive down from the top. They're like, we got to get this done, got to get it done now. Another one is a lot of systems get outdated. Technology changes, company pops up, introduces a platform. It's great, it's fantastic, and then it just kind of fades away and just disappears. And you wind up needing new functionality, and they just didn't keep current with a lot of the new technology trends. Sometimes current system made sense when you bought it. It was great, it was fantastic, it was the new thing, and it made sense when you bought it, but then, your apps have changed, your processes have changed, technology's changed, and you're like, the new system doesn't really meet all the needs we need now, and it's not really growing at a rate that we need it to keep up with. And a big one, again, we've come across, system was bought out by another competitor, and the new companies decided that they're going to phase that system out. They're like, you either got to migrate to our system or we're done. We're just shutting it down and discontinuing it. So you're stuck in a situation where you just have to jump. And then my favorite one, Dad's decided he's had enough with the next door neighbor and he wants to move. Which in this case is basically your CISO, your CTO said, that's it, I've had it, I'm done. I'm tired of the Oracles and the others in the world, and they're like, we're out. So, they decide they're going to jump ship. And those are always fun when those get pulled in. And then the next question that always invariably comes up was, well, where do we move? Who do we move to? And this is in no way pushing these companies. This is just a slide of some of the top companies in the industry that go with it. And these are some things to kind of think about when those kind of come up is, what are the things that we need to consider in our move? What are the critical requirements when considering our move? These are, and I'll break these down into further subsections into slides, so don't think I'm trying to fly through them. How do we determine the right option to move to? What are the questions that you need to ask yourself as an organization in order to make those right decisions and those right choices? And then invariably, how much can we afford? It's just like buying a house. We all look at the $1 million home and we're like, ooh, I want that. Budget doesn't always necessarily allocate the need to buy that $1 million home. So sometimes you got to buy what you can afford and maybe even customize it a little bit to fill in the gaps where you can. So cost is always a big factor to weigh in on that. And then, and so we're going to break down these sections into some other things to think about. What do we need to consider in our move? On-prem, cloud, or hybrid? That's the big question that a lot of organizations are sitting at with these days. Do they go totally on-prem? Do they go totally to the cloud? Or do they kind of wind up sitting in a hybrid approach? And for this is kind of an organizational dependency that you guys need to sit down and take a look at. One of the big ones is you got to look at your organization as a whole. Are we looking at the cloud? Have we even thought about the cloud? Is the cloud, does it even fit within our sector of the market? Because there's certain sectors of the industry that don't want to move into the clouds. Like when you get into finance, they're a little still sensitive about putting too much, that information up into the cloud. So they privatize it. So there's things that you have to consider around that. And that weighs into the second one. Do we even consider the cloud? Is it something that we need to even take into consideration at this point? And then, the big one that usually winds up with most out, it's not the data that moves up, it's the applications. The features and functionality that are getting moved into the cloud that you need to provision and manage. Those are the ones that wind up determining and pushing you into a need to whether you need to think about even looking at the cloud. And that's where you have to consider what platforms are on the market that offer that ability to move into the cloud for you. One of the things too is your segment of the industry. Where's the segment? Where do you sit? Are you in business, finance? Are you in healthcare? Kind of looking at what other organizations within your segment of the industry are doing and seeing where they're going. Believe it or not, this is not like, as much as everybody would like to think, ooh, we're special. It's the same thing over and over again. And it does apply very repeatedly. And the good news is sometimes other industry partners have already looked at these kinds of things and have analyzed some of the same considerations and questions you're going to go through. And you can use them as a baseline to say, well, they've already kind of looked at all this stuff for us and kind of helped point us in the right direction of where we might want to consider going. So it's always a good question to kind of look around at other businesses in your segment and see what's going on with them. And also a big one, you have to talk to the business. What have they got planned for the next three to 5 years? What are they thinking? What kind of applications are they looking at? Are they looking at moving stuff into the cloud? Or have they got any new development efforts on the horizon that you may not be aware of? As much as it is that IT and business should be in sync, usually it's not. So it's always good to have that kind of question and answer with the business to say, hey, what are you guys doing? Give us some information, give us some feedback so we can kind of take this into consideration as we start looking at these kind of options. And the big one, how many people are going to live in the house? That's always a big driving factor because if you've got 150,000, that may drive you one direction. If you're looking at 155 million, you may really only be limited in your options at that point because the costs may get outrageous when you start looking at things like in the cloud for those kinds of size audiences. And believe me, you talk to a cloud provider and they'll start salivating at the mouth when you start mentioning those kinds of numbers for licensing fees. So they'll love you for that one. What are the critical needs when considering our moves? The critical needs in the decision process. What is the current system lacking that is needed immediately? There's always an immediate need. Most of the time when companies have made that decision, it's because the current system isn't meeting a demand, isn't doing something that it needs to, is lacking serious functionality. So those are your big hitters that you want to put at the top of your list when you consider what we want to look at as an organization to move to. You also want to look around open standards. for some of the new technologies that are coming out. A lot of the older technologies, as they came out, they were a little more proprietary, a little closed looped in what they implemented. So, if you rolled out one solution, it didn't make it very easy to move to another or integrate with another, because of the management and the way they interlinked was all proprietary and very heavily controlled. So you want to look around open management, open standards, some of the new stuff that's coming out like WebAuthn and that kind of stuff that's a little more portable and allows cross-platform ability when you want to plug in multiple IAM systems. Another big one that's coming up is delegation to the app owners. A lot of business units now are looking to the fact that they don't want to rely on IT. They don't want us in the decision process. They want to be able to manage their own batch of users. They want to be able to do their own thing. And one of the big things that a lot of systems are looking at, a lot of the new systems are doing now, is what's called delegated management. They want to be able to let the app owners manage their own applications, do their own thing, and take you guys out of the picture. And believe me, it's crazy when it's asked, but it is a very common thing that comes up now. And then one of the things to also consider is ease of integration with your current suite of applications. You want to be able to basically drop in the current new solution. You don't want to really have to try to wind up spending a lot of time with rewrites or modifications. And one of the things a lot of, is like, is this even possible? It is. You'll find that a lot of systems, they built to they integrate with your current system because they had to, but then you'll find that some of the new that they made like an API available that a newer system now can take advantage of, and it makes it very easy to drop in and just basically pick up and run with it and pull out a lot of custom code and custom solution that you've had to do in the past. And this is a really great thing to consider. And as you've heard come up a lot, DevOps, this is a big thing now. A lot of companies want the ability to code, automate, deployment. They do not want IT to slow you down, or slow them down, I should say, excuse me. So the faster you can turn something around, the faster you can get it deployed, the better you're going to make the business, and the happier you're going to make them, and that's going to make your life easier in the long run as well too, because they get off your back for complaining about when things aren't getting done. Now, the big question, how much can we afford? This is one where you got to take in a lot of considerations around this. You got to look at the acquisition of the new licenses. How's it priced? What if I'm using this system for external users? You have to really kind of weigh the pros and cons of how you're looking at the utilization of the system in order to take those kinds of things into the purchase price of what this is going to cost you to make this move. And a lot of people think, this is it. This is all I need to worry about, right? No. You've also got to think about professional services. As much as we're IT professionals, and as much as we're very smart people, we're self-empowered, the problem with it is a lot of people don't think like, well, I've still got to maintain the day-to-day operations of the current system while trying to move in the new system. Sometimes you do need that help, and it is something you do need to take into serious consideration. There are professional services people that do bring a lot to the table, and they do offer that ability to do stuff in a faster turnaround. You might be able to figure it out yourself. It might take you longer though, but ultimately in the end, you also got to juggle that with the fact that you're trying to learn a new system while support the new system, while deal with the day-to-day management, while deal with tickets. It can inundate an IT division. So it's something that has to be taken into consideration and thought and weighed through. And then of course, you've got your internal cost. As much as most organizations will nowadays, they all spread the cost around. So, standing up network infrastructure, storage, databases, it all requires licensing costs. It all requires internal costs to be spread around. It's not like the organization's going to pay for that. They pass that on to your business unit or your organizational unit. So this is all the stuff that gets weighed in when you have to look at what's the total cost of what this new system's going to be to our organization to bring in and implement. Now, preparing for your move. You've done all this, and you've now picked your product. How do you get ready? Well, how do we get ready for this massive change that is coming? Basically, you have to plan, and I'll get into that. These are some of the ones I'm going to break down a little bit more. What are the impacts going to be current and already announced to upcoming projects? What are the infrastructure changes going to be needed to support the new system? And then, of course, how much resistance are we going to get from the kids, which is applications and IT staff? Invariably, there's going to be resistance when you want to bring in a new identity management solution. It's invariable. And then, of course, how quickly are we going to have to get this done? Timing is one of the critical pieces you have to weigh into this. It is the driving factor for a lot of orgs when they bring them in. It's like, okay, well, we're going to do this, but you've only got like X time frame to make it happen, and that's it. And sometimes that's very difficult to manage. How do we get ready for the massive change that is coming? And I can't say this enough, plan, plan, plan. A lot of people will jump into this. They think it's like swimming. Oh, I'll just jump into the deep end of the pool and I'll figure it out. No, you'll drown, and I'll be coming up with a life preserver to save you, because it will inundate you, it will consume you, and it's just you're just not going to be able to handle it. And when you try to do that with your day-to-day operations, it gets difficult. Determining all your resources. Resource planning is very critical in this stage. A lot of companies are very resource constrained, so sometimes this is where you have to really sit down and look at, do you have the resources to tackle this? And is this a need where you do need to look at some professional services to come in and kind of help you out? Build a project plan. I cannot emphasize this enough. Sit down in a room with the people and plan it out and work out what the timelines are going to be. And this is the one that will help you work backwards from an end date and figure out where your points of pain are going to be, where your areas of shortcomings are going to be, where can you improve time to delivery, and how to work out a phased approach. That is very critical. Do not try and boil the ocean. It is very difficult to try not to do that. What are the impacts going to be to current and already announced upcoming projects? There's projects that are already going to be in flight when you decide to do this. What are the impacts going to be to them? There's going to be potential resource problems, shared resources to those those projects that are already going on. There's also timetable impacts. Those projects are going to be in flight, and you may be impacting their timetables while you're trying to deploy the new system. Also, there's a potentiality that there's projects that are in flight to do stuff that the new system you're buying is going to obsolete and make not even necessary. So there's those kinds of impacts to take into consideration. And then for upcoming projects, you've got potential savings that you can get to prevent projects from starting as they're no longer needed. So there's a way to look at, this is a way to look at ways to recoup the cost or even substantiate the cost for building a new system. Potential savings to shorten project estimates and timelines. There may be a way to save money. There might be a project that's like going to take 6 months, and your new IAM system is going to shorten it down to only 2 months. So you have cost savings in there that you can get out of that as well too. And there's also infrastructure savings. If you go to a cloud solution, there's an opportunity to save a lot of infrastructure costs from that perspective, or offset that cost, because instead of doing it internal, sometimes it might be cheaper to go external with a cloud solution. Now, the big one, how much resistance are we going to get from the kids? The applications. There's impact to them for integrating a new system, of course. They're not going to be happy. You're introducing change. There's coding work that you're introducing to them that they didn't plan for. You decided to start something and take on a task that they didn't have in their plan for the year. You're going to get resistance and pushback. You're also going to have issues with permissions potentially. The newer system can do more, so thereby of which it needs a higher level of permissions and access control. It's going to invariably, they're going to be like, first question out of their mouth, why? Why do you need more permissions? And it's getting them on board to understand that it needs more access. And the problem with it is too, sometimes the applications get really finicky about, sometimes it does too much. They don't like that. The app owners, the developers, they're like, well, you're taking stuff away from me. I don't like that. And sometimes they can be a little, like with the fiefdoms, everybody's like, oh, you're taking stuff away, and I don't like that. And invariably, it is a conversation to be had, and it's a matter to get them on board and be a supporter more than a blocker to you. And believe it or not, every time I've done something like this, it's always the IT staff that are the bigger complainers. And the first words out of their mouth, change? Why? They're like, everything's fine the way that it is. The system, we know what needs to be done. We've got all this stuff figured out. Why are we going to change stuff? And I'm not trying to knock anybody in the room, but believe it or not, every organization I go into, I always fight with the IT staff. because they're always wanting to know, why are we changing something? Why can't it just stay the way that it is? And I always tell them there's a reason why we call it IT. It's not infrastructure technology. It stands for it changes. It is not a stagnant field. It will change. If you don't want change, I recommend go into ditch digging. It's been the same for the last 100,000 years. So, it is the way that it is. And one of the things they get upset about is there's new systems to learn, there's current processes and procedures that are impacted. It is what it is. And these are things they complain about. And then there's training to go to. And it's going to take them time to ramp up and learn a new system. And invariably, it is what it is. But it's an opportunity where you have to sell it to the IT staff and say, look, not necessarily saying it's a resume builder, but the fact that they're getting exposed to new technologies, new standards, they are growing, they are helping themselves as well as helping the organization, and that is a critical win for everybody around the org. I know I'm getting low on time, and I'm going to fly a little bit through this, and I'm sorry. How quickly are we going to have to do this? Time. It's the thing we need more of, and it's the thing that we're often the least given. What's going to be the driver for this? Sometimes management comes in and says, nope, it's got to be done. You don't get more time. And that's always an uphill battle to have with your management directive, is trying to get them on board. Sometimes you have old systems that are coming to end of life. The deal is a lot of organizations get really sensitive when they're getting and when they go to an end of life or getting out of life for support. They don't want to be in a situation where they have a production outage and they're on a system that's no longer supported. And that's not a position nobody in this room wants to be in, because the last thing you want to tell a VP is, we're not supported. That'll ruin a weekend. And then, and the other thing is you also have potential EOL hitting from several vendors. I was at one company where the OS, the database, and the IAM system all were end-of-lifing within the same 3 weeks. That was a fun conversation to be had. It wasn't just fixing one thing, it was fixing all three things. And it is a very, very difficult situation to manage. And that's why you have to plan a timeline so that you can get through and determine your phases. It's coordinating a massive number of teams. You've got multiple project schedules to manage. Upper management needs to drive the prioritizations. And invariably, this is the one thing as an IT person you just need to accept. Some things are going to slip. It is out of your control. You just have to deal with it, and you have to manage it the best you can, not let it drag you down because you feel like a failure or feel like something's slipping. It's part of this business. It is, and that is out of your control. Packing and unpacking. And yes, believe it or not, it is that bad when you got to jam that much stuff into the new system. What are we taking with us from the old system? Policy cleanup. This is an opportunity to look at the way you do things with inside of your current system. It's an opportunity to clean up. Sometimes you're going to move and there's stuff that's being phased out in the process of being moved over. And you don't need to take it with you. You can just eliminate it altogether. There's also an opportunity for consolidation and reuse. Architecture, infrastructure can be consolidated down and things can be saved. And then there's also getting what you need out of the old system. This is critical. Making sure you have everything out before you flip that off switch and turn that system off for the last time. Because the last thing you want to hear is that you have to go back to the backup because you forgot something. And the old system's been deprecated and shut down and it was oops, we forgot it. And then there's a big one. Should we even consider taking anything over? Is this an opportunity that maybe we should just start fresh? Look at things from a new perspective. There's new processes with the new system. When you bring into the new systems, there's options for importing. You bring over as much as possible with data manipulation to simplify the ramp-up time to get the new system up and running. There's third-party tools that are available to manipulate data to bring in from older systems into newer systems now. A lot of vendors have popped up with those kinds of tool sets now to make that option. There's also opportunity for in-house development, so that this is the way you get your developers in, that you have an opportunity for API support to be built. And then, of course, we're starting over. You just use the old system as a template, and you do policy cleanup. And it gives you an opportunity to simplify complex workflows, because there's an opportunity to sit down and say, are we still needing some of these complex workflows? Some of them were pretty, complex to begin with, and now there's an opportunity in the new one where it's, simple drag and drop to build workflows. simplifies it down severely. You may only need to do a couple steps. And there's new management flows for rapid turnaround and automation. And then, of course, invariably maintaining 2 residences, and I'm going to fly right through this, and I'm sorry. I talk too much. That's what I get told. So questions from anybody? Because I know we're pretty much out of time, and I'm sorry about that.
That is all right. Thank you very much. Any questions? No, Anthony, thank you very much. What we're going to do definitely in ID Pro, we will create a special section for moving. Anyone who want to join the movers company, if you want an experienced mover, you can definitely talk to this nice gentleman or us. Our organization, as you probably know, are trying to collect as much knowledge from all of you to help other people to do what we did, and definitely improve the process. Thank you very much for this very important topic.